Hey, welcome to a new podcast episode of Building the Open Web. We have again Matt today. He's becoming a regular host almost. And we also have Greg and Aidan from ChainSafe today with us. Thank you for joining.
Hey.
Hey guys, thanks for having us.
Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background into what you're doing and what is ChainSafe.
Yeah, so Greg and I are both co-founders at ChainSafe. We're a blockchain research and development firm. We're currently approximately 45 people, and day to day our mission is to build the infrastructure for Web3. And so a lot of our work is building implementations of blockchains, but there's also a big focus on developer tooling and products as well. And so some of our kind of more well-known projects that we work on are a Typescript implementation of the Eth2 ecosystem called Lodestar, a Golang implementation of the token called Gossamer, a Rust implementation of Filecoin called Forest, and Ethermint, which is Ethereum on Tendermint using the Cosmos SDK. We're also the maintainers of Web3.js and a really exciting project called Chainbridge, which connects a lot of those blockchains I just mentioned. Outside of that, we're working on a few other projects as well and other things. And one of the most exciting things I personally think is one of our first release products, which is ChainSafe Files, which if you're interested in finding out more, we'd love for you to visit it at files.chainsafe.io. And it's very simply a user-facing application that allows you to easily log in through a crypto-native wallet and upload files to Filecoin in a way that you're familiar with as a traditional non-crypto user. So yeah, just a whole bunch of different stuff, and we're excited to dive in a little bit deeper on a few of them.
Awesome. And maybe we can start with, where did you guys grow up? How did you meet each other?
Yeah, for sure. I can dive into that. I met Aidan and the rest of the team because I had known one of our other co-founders previously from doing some like programming kind of bootcamp stuff. And then one day I just got a call from him being like, hey, you ever done blockchain stuff? We need some help. And quite literally, I just showed up. They had like 2 desks and like 3 chairs at this like architecture firm. And it was like a bunch of weirdos just kind of sitting with these architects. And we just went at it. And I don't know, a couple months later, things, shaped up and ChainSafe kind of evolved from what it was then and turned into kind of what it is today. But I know Aidan and the rest of the crew met up at like the OG Ethereum meetup, like a few months prior to that, really, down in Toronto, and kind of jammed out at one of the Toronto libraries for a really long time, right before that kind of architecture office. So, ChainSafe, born out of a library and architect's office.
And was it 2015, 2016, roughly?
2017?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a few of us met end of 2016 at that Toronto Ethereum Developers Meetup. As Greg said, him and one of our co-founders knew each other previous to that. And another one of our co-founders is my best friend from high school. So a lot of us have known each other previous to ChainSafe. One of our other co-founders we met at a meetup around the Christmas break of 2016 to 2017.
And did you have any exposure to Bitcoin community, or was it pretty much like beginnings of Ethereum as your first introduction to crypto?
One of our co-founders has been part of, the cryptocurrency general community for many years. He's the person that Greg knew previous to this, Stu. And just, speaking for myself, just exposure through friends, exposure through, not necessarily funny stories. Like, for example, in 2011, when I was still in high school, I got a call from one of my best friends, and he called me up frantic, being like, dude, I found this thing and we're gonna make so much money. And, he was always a very opportunistic dude. And so I immediately kind of responded being like, okay, man, just leave me alone. Like, I'm just, high school kid. Like, I don't want to be focused on that right now. And so just little exposure like that, but nothing too seriously, until Ethereum, which brought this sense of programmable logic and programmable human relationship. which for me was, the more exciting side of things, which is, how do we codify human relationship, which definitely Ethereum innovated beyond anything previously possible.
I'd love to take this sort of background opportunity for you guys to maybe discuss a little bit about this first Toronto Toronto developers meetup for Ethereum. Who was running it back in the day? What was the early sort of scene like? It's not rare that I get to speak to fellow Canadians on the pod, or even in my work at Near, or just in the space. So this is kind of cool. So can you tell us what that was like? So this is I think you said December 2016.
Around that time, but I mean, yeah, just around that whole build up to the beginnings of 2017, there was just a lot of people who were interested in the space. It was a meetup that was founded by, or I believe was at least stewarded by what was the Ledger Labs team, and is now kind of just a whole bunch of different cool and exciting projects. So someone like Ethan Wildling was definitely one of the reasons that there is such a community in Toronto. So very fortunate to have had people take ownership of that responsibility and to really flourish that community by having these regular meetups. And yeah, from there, we then ended up taking over that stewardship, and currently haven't had one in a while, but will be hoping to have some soon, as soon as that's possible. There's a lot of online content, so I don't feel like there's enough of a reason to do kind of online meetups, which just there's so much going on. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to restart those in the coming months. I'm being really optimistic when I say that. But yeah, I mean, we're really fortunate to just have some really incredible people like Nickdson and Richard Moore, who would talk about things in such, they would make these things so accessible that I don't think at the time we really we appreciated how lucky we were to have those people just being a part of the local Toronto community, right? Like, obviously we didn't take it for granted, but we didn't really appreciate that not every city has a Richard Moore and a Nickdson, right? And so as we got kind of more into the space, it became clear what an incredible community we do have and how fortunate we are to be part of it, and to have had that be a major reason for why we did feel like we could do such incredible things that actually have an impact. And it's because the people around us were doing that.
What was your first assignment as you started ChainSafe? How did you secure the first project? How did you go about it?
That's a good question. One of the first things we did was education-related work. So one of our founders worked on some Solidity development materials for an organization, and then one of our kind of major development projects was to work on a platform that would allow for the ownership and rights of content to be traced and to have those financial relationships basically kind of traced and realized. So that was one of the first kind of development projects that we worked on. Greg, is there anything you would bring up as kind of something you feel is important to bring up?
No, I think you got those. It's that's really how it really kicked off, I'd say. It was just kind of a lot of POCs at the beginning, especially kind of 2017. A lot of people in Toronto asking us, what can you really do with this tech? Because, Ethereum was so new still, even back then. That was the era where Web3.js had you didn't know what version to use, and you honestly didn't know what version you were installing half the time, right? And everything just didn't work. There's even the MetaMask bug, switch networks, and it's all right, delete MetaMask or restart your browser, right? So it was early back then, and yeah, a lot of it was just POCs and kind of, that whole realm. I think it wasn't until really 2018 till we started doing a lot more protocol work and started diving deep into Geth, which was our first one, Go Ethereum. And that kind of kickstarted the fire that I think everybody at ChainSafe kind of caught, saying like, okay, this is way more fun than building Dapps. Yeah, I think that's kind of, I guess, my twist to what Aidan said.
So how did the blockchain space evolve since you joined it from 2017 up until now?
That's a good question. I think from my perspective, so as people that like really focus on infra for a long time, one of the big things I've noticed is that there are a lot more players, a lot more people that are knowledgeable lower into the stack. This goes for pretty much all the protocols that are out there right now today. Near, Polkadot, Cosmos, Ethereum, or EVM chains in general. You're starting to see a lot of people that care and understand. You're starting to see a lot. What I'm starting to notice is actually the developer space is changing and has changed quite a bit, where a lot of quote unquote DApp developers are very strong engineers as well, and you are able to understand and contribute to some level of like lower end of the stack. So whether that be in the Ethereum world, truffle type tooling where it's like a ganache EVM implementation, you're starting to see like a lot of developers being able to actually like do that. And it's what I see is reshaping our term of a full stack developer is the way I see it. So, traditionally we hear a full stack developer, you think the mean stack, Express, Mongo, whatever, Angular, or Mern with React, and Node, where it's like, you just kind of need to know the basics. Where here it's almost that an Ethereum, like a blockchain full stack developer is really understanding a lot more than that. It's understanding how that database works, right? And it's understanding, what are the ramifications of calling some low level function, right? Especially with languages like Solidity, you're starting to see, there's not really that many basic contracts anymore. We're talking about assembly and stuff like that. So the biggest change I've seen from 2017 to now is that the education level of the developers building and deploying to production has gone very, very high. And arguably, potentially that's like a barrier to entry. I don't know. But that's the biggest change I've seen, is just like the actual talent and the skill set needed to deploy efficient applications on top of blockchains has skyrocketed. You could kind of get away with anything back then. Now, it's especially with prices and how things like going, especially on-chain fees, it's very difficult.
What I'd really like to know is like, when the developers get more sophisticated, do they get more vocal? Do they get more picky about the tools that they use? Do they pipe up more on GitHub issues? Like, does it make your job harder, or does it make it easier that they're more sophisticated?
That's a really good one. Okay, so two contrasting takes on this, I think. I look at Web3.js, which we're maintaining and has recently been transferred to our organization. And there's two contrasting opinions. We have people that are very helpful. I go and look at their profile. Whenever someone opens an issue, I typically look at who they are. I like to get a good understanding of the type of person I'm dealing with. What I tend to find is people that work on the DApp front, typically I see a lot of smart contracts or, whatever it is, that it's typically a pretty good conversation, all said and done. And there's usually not a big problem. What we end up seeing, though, is a lot of rude people. It's unbelievable, actually, to see how rude some people actually get on issues because of a single frustration. And I think what's really interesting to see is when you see the experienced person come in, regardless of their opinion, they usually have a fix in mind already, and they already understand the code base, which is really useful. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the experience thing earlier, right? Is that the level of experience has gone so high that people are able to contribute to just about anything they want to contribute towards. If they find something wrong with Web3.js, we're seeing like, hey, I found this issue, and then they open a PR to fix like some deep level piece of the code that I honestly didn't know existed until they, brought it up. It's way more collaborative than I ever would have thought it would have been. And like, I'm seeing collaboration from like everybody across the stack. And that's what's like really interesting about it, in my opinion.
Maybe we can also discuss how you operate as a business and maybe provide some background of projects you worked with. Maybe to start with, how do you scale up and down with the demand and the volatile market? Like, how does it go month by month, and how do you manage all of the things simultaneously?
The way that we manage it is with incredible people that are in leadership positions that are working on everything that you just mentioned on a regular basis. And so having, a very structured project management department, having a very structured engineering department with operations and business development, and all working together to achieve our mission, to achieve our vision. And, very tangibly, the work that we do has up until this point constantly been a need. And the things that we work on are very important for us to be sustainable in a long-term way. The things that I mentioned to you previously are all things that, will need to be a part of the stack regardless of the prices, right? We're not building something that requires the price of ETH to be a certain place. Everyone's going to always need Web3.js. That's just a given. And so a lot of what we do is a focus on sustainability, is a focus on things that do have long-term impact and not just short-term. And so a lot of the things that we also do is then also balancing that with some, short-term interesting projects, whether it be helping out a project that is looking to have someone come in and look at how they've implemented libp2p and potentially add support, and then potentially engineering that recommended next step, right? They could be things that are also, from an engineering perspective and research perspective, really interesting for us. So there's just a constant balance of all these different things working together towards, at the end of the day, what is a clear mission of building the infrastructure for Web3. And all of that, by realizing that vision, irrespective of the actual price point, there will be utility in the technology being used by so many people. And so, we don't have the same maybe constraints that other organizations do.
Greg mentioned that it was more interesting to work on lower level stuff, developer tooling. Was it also back then when you guys made the choice to pivot from Dapps and POCs and education material to more protocol work? Was it financially motivated because you saw it as a longer term play, something that was essential to the space?
I mean, I would say that there's definitely an element of business sense there, but it was also taking risk, right? We were one of the first two people that received a grant from the Web3 Foundation to work on Polkadot, on implementation of the Polkadot host, and it's something that we've been working on for years. The same with Eth2, right? Like, we started working on that without a clear, tangible outcome that was the world we see today in the blockchain space. Like, we had our intuition and our expectation just as technologists and as people who are building with the technology of what will be necessary to achieve an actual massively adopted Web3 ecosystem. But there wasn't necessarily a clear sense of what we see today. I mean, if you go back on Twitter, people questioned whether Polkadot would ever even, be live or ever do the things that it's doing, which is obviously, now seems funny that people were questioning whether Polkadot was a serious project where, look at things today and that's just a joke. But, at the time, there was definitely not necessarily the clear-cut perspective that we have today, or at least that people have today, of a multi-chain future. Whereas back in the day, we were always technically objective and interested in lots of different chains. However, there just weren't very many at the time. So it's finally starting to become a reality. But there wasn't necessarily at the time, like, it was, something that we put our reputation, put our livelihoods on the line for, and saying we're not going to just specialize in Ethereum, but rather specialize in blockchain technology as a core skill set.
I'm glad you mentioned grants too, just at a high level and very briefly for our listeners so that they understand like how ChainSafe operates. What is like the general sort of business model? Is it grants for implementing these various sort of protocol clients and tools?
Yeah, like that's definitely an aspect of our business. Another aspect is general R&D that we do for different projects that need help, for example, with something like libp2p, general consulting and implementation of these protocols for different use cases. And auditing, for example, is something that we've just started to do more publicly. So we've recently completed the audit for Connect on their Vector release. And so, yeah, just doing a whole bunch of things in that realm as well that we hope to bring to other aspects of blockchain technology and not just smart contracts. But yeah, I mean, just doing a whole bunch of different things that maybe the more publicly known ones are the grant-based projects, but under the hood, we definitely do a whole bunch of different work and types of engagements beyond just grants.
So I wanted to ask, just because that's where I met you guys. You guys got very intertwined with Eth Global Events and kind of road showing a lot. Like I remember seeing just pictures of you and suitcases like every second week on Twitter. So I'm just wondering, like, how did that all get started? Like just hitting the road and like there was just this explosion of events and stuff. How did you guys as ChainSafe team just decide like this is what we got to do? We got to take the show on the road.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, actually. And it comes back to Eth Waterloo, again, and just having the access to such incredible opportunities just based on geography and the privilege that comes with being based in Toronto. So the first Eth Global event was, an hour and a half from where we live. And there we really worked on something that I think was one of the things that we were the most proud of at that point in time. It was a project called Eth Drive, where the goal was to basically allow any drive to be a one-time use cold wallet. So you would basically cut off the internet on your computer, you would scrub or format the drive and then load a key onto it. And just seeing that and what we were able to do and how much fun that was for the team really kicked off what we saw as being kind of one of the most incredible opportunities, which is just connecting with people, just talking to people. Like, for example, when we built what later became the Girly Network at Eth Berlin, if we didn't have access to the people who were there to ask questions, to coach us through things, I don't think we would have been as eager as we were to do something like that at a hackathon. And so I think those opportunities for people getting into the space are massive because you're there with the people who are building the tools that then you're going to be used. And so there's no greater opportunity. So for example, going back to Eth Waterloo, having Nickdson and Richard Moore who were there to ask questions about building something in the Ethereum space with JavaScript. I mean, there's just no better people that you wanted to be able to ask questions. And they're trapped in a room with you for a weekend. So, that was definitely a realization of, wow, what an incredible community we're in and how much we want to give back to that. So, since those days, we, not as much with COVID, but regularly sponsor university hackathons, not usually crypto related or blockchain related, but just general student hackathons. And that's been incredible, just to bring back to the community something that we feel like we received just out of good faith for what that could bring to the future of our ecosystem.
I just want to jump in. You mentioned Nickdson, ENS, and Richard Moore, Ethers.js, a couple of times. Is there any other sort of specific relationship between those two and ChainSafe other than the early days?
No, I mean, other than the fact that they are, I would say, especially at the time, the two of the people that are the reason for, JavaScript, Ethereum tooling at the time being what it was. So that was just incredible. to be able to have them so close. And now for us to be taking over and maintaining Web3.js and to be building out the implementation of Eth2 and all the encompassing libraries in Typescript, it's just an incredible full circle for us to be doing that and to be kind of providing that in a way that was very accessible for us at the time to use.
That's a real student become the master story, huh?
And talking about ETH2, I wonder, like, are there any challenges either for ETH2 or other clients that you're building with building the code for maybe spec that is not fully baked sometimes? Like, how does it work, like decentralized engineering effort and working with other teams like this?
Yeah, for sure. I can speak to that. So Lodestar, so our Eth2 client, in itself, it has its own challenge. It's a full TypeScript client, browser compatible, and we're writing it in parallel with some stuff in assembly script as well. So in itself, that is a very challenging thing to do, since what is being asked of the network is difficult with a single threaded language like JavaScript. So it's not the easiest right out of the gate. But I think in regards to a spec, Eth2 probably had the most different or most unique way that the spec was built, for us at least, because working with Polkadot, working on Ethermint as well in Cosmos, we have a single team similar to how Near operates. Right, you have like a single team. You got that research team. They're like heads down, working full steam ahead on ensuring that spec gets built out properly and that your client gets built out perfectly there. With the Eth2 one, it was much more of, although there is the EF core, research team, and they do an incredible job, it's a little bit more decentralized. It's kind of on the fly, right? And there's like a lot, I think there was like 200-300 people contributing to the spec alone 2 years ago. We're probably upwards of close to 600 last time I checked, might be more. And that adds an interesting element, right? Because there's always so many ideas flying around. And as we're developing the client and moving forward, it brings its own challenges, us being in JavaScript, but in general, just, as stuff changes, it's like, okay, how does this affect us, right? How does this affect a single threaded environment when now it's like, hey, the way we're doing networking is going to totally change, or, hey, we're going to switch the signature scheme, or so and so forth, right? And I think with, ETH2, it was overall a really good experience so far. I don't think there's been any real like hitches, so to speak. Just like definitely a different way for it to be done, right? And I think our biggest challenges we have itself is simply just making this work in a single threaded environment, as well as with the focus on the browser. We're really excited though, because so phase 0 has been deployed obviously, and it's running smoothly, and super exciting. We actually have Lodestar syncing. It operates quite well. And we just don't have validators running as of yet. We're going to get that going hopefully in the next month or so. But we're actually excited for the next phase, which is light client prototyping. So, one of the things that where we're going to shine is the fact that we can actually run a full light client in like a MetaMask, and it's totally compatible since you can just npm install us, right? You just npm install Lodestar, you get a light client right out of the gate, and your browser extension can operate as a light client. Also, ETH2's spec is designed so that the light clients have a server to begin with, right? There's like an incentivization model built in. There's some open questions there, obviously, and we've got some great community members kind of chiming in. But that's where we're really excited for Lodestar, especially because that's going to be like the shining moment for us, is when we get to actually start showing like, here's all the stuff, it's in the browser, it works, you can efficiently query everything you need. And we're, ultimately realizing like one of the big visions of blockchains, which is a light client, right? We always talk about it, everybody talks about it, but the incentivization models are never really there. So it's exciting to actually like see one of those like key cornerstone features actually get built out, finished, and working on ETH2.
That's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see sort of like the explosion of innovation that happens on top of that. I wanted to ask about ChainSafe Files. So you mentioned that at sort of the top of the pod, and it's a consumer facing thing, or at least more so than normal ChainSafe work. So how did that sort of inception happen, and what were the motivations behind producing ChainSafe Files? what is it? How does it operate? How is it different from other sort of Filecoin kind of gateway stuff?
I want to give a shout out to Greg for sure there, because we were working on some more developer facing product ideas, and Greg's kind of vision has been always to present things, if possible, in a way that is compatible with the Web2 world and can cater to the Web2 world. And that was where, working on Filecoin really led us to focusing on this, because we feel that, the ability to log in through Wallet Connect or to log in through GitHub or to make your own username and password, and then to have an encryption password on top of that for your files, and to have the ability to pay with credit card or pay with crypto is just absolutely beyond appealing in terms of what that will be for mass adoption, in terms of truly bridging communities of people, right? For the first time, you'll be able to use a blockchain-based project with your parents. And that's definitely something that Greg has really pushed for. And, he's talked about it time and time again. So definitely want to give him all the credit there. And really, when that opportunity came forward, it was just, wow, can we actually build something for lots of different people? You can be totally anonymous, have end-to-end encryption, and log in with GitHub or Google Auth. That has a potential for impact in our space was just a no-brainer. Of course we have to do this, right? We have to pave forth this new paradigm of multiple different types of users being able to utilize this technology. And then underneath, this consumer-facing app, which will soon be released, is a Filecoin pinning service. And so imagine a traditional API to interact with Filecoin, so that anyone anywhere from a hobbyist developer, a student at a hackathon, all the way up to an enterprise can now take advantage of all the incredible things that Filecoin can provide for you. Everything from price to redundancy optimization to knowing that you will always have access to your files. These are new paradigms that are truly, in our opinion, revolutionizing the way we talk about a go-to-market and user acquisition strategy in the blockchain space, which previously has really been self-reflective to how can you onboard the people around you in your immediate circle, which this, we believe, is way beyond that.
That's so cool. And, Greg mentioned to me kind of in a private channel a few weeks ago that it was really tough to deal with users that were anonymous. What were the challenges there with that aspect of ChainSafe Files?
Yeah, that's like a really unique exposing me, eh? It's a unique problem, right? Because we're trying to offer this experience that doesn't feel like a blockchain. Blockchains have faux pas for like normies, so to speak. Crypto, the immediate gets tied to crypto prices, scams, you name it, left and right. So when we try to do this, you also have to realize, what are people really used to? And they're used to convenience, right? We're talking magic links for sign-in. We're talking notifications. We're talking all this stuff. And when somebody logs in with a wallet, all we get is an address, right? We get an address with a signed message proving ownership of the wallet. We can then issue them, auth tokens, JBTs to the website, and they can navigate our website and have a great experience. The problem is, one, fully decentralized like that means that we cannot send you an email notification. We cannot send you any sort of notification, really. So the experience then changes. It's okay. Now we have to build for the fact that we only have their attention for the next 15 seconds. What can we do within 15 seconds to ensure that we're giving them the information they need about possible issues with their account billing, possible issues with whatever it may be. And billing is its own thing, right? Because you either have to hold funds in some special escrow contract, right? That like a Sablier or something similar to that on an Ethereum basis, or there's really no way to do subscriptions, right? Because we can't guarantee that the user will have funds unless they've actually locked the funds into something. So if we want to take a subscription for a service and they're totally decentralized, we now run into a whole other issue, right? And that's why the notifications becomes a problem, because if they run out and their subscription ends, what do we do? Do we lock them out of their account and wait for them to log back in to say, hey, you don't have access? There's all these questions that arise, and it's simply because how do you contact a user you don't know? And like, that's one of the funniest problems that, you have when trying to design it nicely so that you get the experience that you normally have. And you almost have to just throw it out the door and say, well, okay, these users just are forfeiting their ability to have that. You could also add a burner address where they could just get a burner email, but like, it is what it is. And like, that's like one of the biggest fundamental problems is like, a lot of the experience disappears when you can't contact your user. Push notifications are huge. You just can't do them, right? Now you could do browser push notifications, technically speaking, and that wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, in general, like that's an issue when you have a wallet style login.
Well, guys, I just want to say, like, we really enjoyed having you on the pod and chatting with you. I don't know if Sasha has any more questions. I have sort of one final kind of question just to wrap up. I feel like we didn't touch on this. We touched on sort of the early days of ChainSafe, but what is the ChainSafe culture like, and what is it like now, and what's the sort of general kind of vibe with the team? Can you share any like funny moments or memes or weird shit that you guys do?
I mean, I think a great way to explain it is just, people that want to be working together. Most of the team that has been here for a while has been here from basically the beginning. And it's just about being able to translate that to new people that join. And so, we hope that, maybe a good example is last Eth Berlin. We accidentally, on purpose, rented one giant loft space that was sleeping 8 people. And we didn't really expect it to be the size that it was. We thought it would be a little bit bigger. But yeah, you had 8 of us sleeping in one giant room. And yeah, like we could have got smaller Airbnbs, but that was the thing that fit us best. And I think that's a good example of, us when we do things together, we'd rather be together and we'd rather do things as a team, as you've seen, as you mentioned at the hackathons. So it's really that togetherness that leads to our culture. And yeah, with COVID, it's tough. People around the world that don't have people they live with or immediate family near them are more alone than ever. And it hasn't been an easy adjustment, even for companies that are remote first. I mean, anyone that pretends like it's just been a snap of the fingers and you've adjusted to a life of honestly loneliness, even for us. I mean, I don't see Greg. We're under very strict lockdown right now. And, he's 20-minute walk away from me right now, and I haven't seen him in a long time. And, I think just getting used to that life and bringing that to other people has definitely adjusted our culture and how we work together and how we need to be more explicit about the things that we do and not take for granted the connections that we already have.
Yep, and I also noticed that you explicitly mentioned things about your culture on your website under core values. How long did it take to develop them? Was it a process kind of throughout, or was it from the very beginning you wanted to be explicit about it? How did that happen?
It's a really good question. So we're fortunate to have, and actually one of them is our first employee. He just had his 3-year anniversary. Awesome. Our VP of operations, and Amr, who's just around 2 years, who's our VP of project management. They took ownership of, we always said our mission, we always said our vision, we always had a sense of our values, but we never took an actual org design process beyond what we already kind of just took as our day-to-day. And they, about a year ago, took it upon themselves to create what you saw on our website, which, took about 8 months to not just come up with that, but to come up with a general, outline of how our organization functions, how different departments interact with one another, discussing with stakeholders what they are looking for, what they want, how they want to better be represented. what they want, their primary focus is to be on. And so, that is one of the outputs of about 8 months of work that they led, also with our VP of Engineering, David. And really, it's all of that has really, I think, defined for us how we plan on moving forward in 2021 as we grow to do all of the things that we've talked about and all the things we haven't talked about that are yet to be released. So yeah, we're really fortunate to have people outside of the founders who have taken ownership of this organization and made it theirs as much as it is ours, and have led forward. And that to me is the thing I'm most proud of, is that people outside of the founders have put themselves into leadership positions and given themselves the responsibility of defining exactly what things like our values are.
And last question I have, you touched briefly on COVID situation. How was it expanding out of Toronto into kind of globally and expanding and during the COVID? How was that happening?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We're really, really fortunate to have an incredible person, a people operations manager who's really, she's taken it upon herself to, really push forward with the things that you just mentioned, and making sure that we are able to provide kind of that easy first steps at ChainSafe. And in general, we've always been about 75% in Toronto, 25%, and slowly throughout the year it became 50-50. So we've always, because of that, been a remote first team. So in terms of those types of practices, nothing too much changed, but the processes in terms of what we're doing to bring people together, how we facilitate town halls with so many people. These are maybe some things that have been adjusted to account for how many people are at our organization. But I wouldn't say that functionally a lot has changed as much as how we do certain things has had to be adjusted.
Cool. And you also do a pretty good job at discoverability of everything you work on. There is your work link on the website which links to all of the projects. But I was wondering, beyond this, if people want to find out more about what you do, what's the best place to go?
First and foremost, GitHub. If you want to see kind of what a day at ChainSafe looks like, that's the best place to really see what we're doing. And beyond that, our Medium is a great place to keep up with the different things that we're releasing and explaining. And Twitter is definitely another great place. So we're ChainSafe and ChainSafeth with a TH at the end on Twitter. And then outside of that, we are also, I need to make clear that we're also hiring a lot right now. And our current openings include a Rust developer position, a Golang technical lead, as well as Golang developer. We got a Typescript backend / Typescript developer, depending on, as Greg said, it's hard to sometimes define what we do versus what the traditional world calls a backend developer. We're looking for a DevOps engineer, and our latest job offering that we're looking for is a technical recruiter to join us full time.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for coming today and sharing the story.
Thanks, guys, for all your time and just all the great charting us through the Toronto ecosystem and how ChainSafe came to be and all the awesome projects you're working on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it.
Peace, guys. That was awesome. Thank you.